about this particular subject. He made me realize that the Pharisees were really trying to do the right thing. They were trying to do everything perfectly. And by doing things perfectly, they became arrogant because we're the only ones that know what to do. They lost focus on the spiritual things. They were just, you had to do a certain thing a certain way. The story about the scripture in Leviticus that says you are not to boil a kid, baby coat, in milk. That was a pagan custom in that area that the Israelites had taken over. So God wanted to make sure that they were not, since they knew that that was happening, do not boil a kid in his mother's milk. Well, they took that to the extreme. If you ate goat meat with cheese, you might be eating the cheese that was made from the mother goat's milk. And so they had to separate cheese and meat. They had plates for cheese, plates for meat. It was just a ridiculous, but they thought that was what God wanted. So that was a new perspective on the Pharisees. Also, he said something that was very good. He said they majored in minors. You know, they forgot about the spiritual. They forgot about all the things that God had done for them, and they just focus on these minor details about not eating cheese with meat. So, and he said also, you know, you can get too much of a good thing. You can get too much of a good thing, and that has happened to me. Back when I was younger, I took some golf vacations, and we were going to play 4 courses in 3 days, 18, 36, 18. By that end of the second day, the end of the third 18, I was not looking forward to tomorrow, because I love golf, but that's just too much golf, just too much golf. And the other day, Carolyn was talking to Lisa Prince, and she had it on speaker, and Lisa said, well, Ronnie wants a coconut cream pie. And I heard Lisa, and I said, oh, Lisa, I'd love, and she, you know, Lisa is a good person. She does so many things for Miss Betty and other people. A few days later, she shows up at my door with an entire coconut cream pie. Now, the reason that I like coconut, Carolyn does not like coconut. So Carolyn is not in the habit of making you me coconut cakes or coconut pies, but here I have this entire coconut pie. Well, you know I'm going to eat it all. Now, not all at once, but you know what? When it got down to that last piece in the pan, I could not eat it. Could not eat it. Too much of a good thing. My Uncle Roy, when he was a little boy, they had some beehives at my granddaddy's farm, and they had robbed the beehives of the honey, and there was this big pan of honey. And my Uncle Roy was the only one in the house. He decided he was going to get all the honey he wanted. He got so sick, from that time on, he could not eat another bite of honey. So you see, too much of a good thing. And that was what the Pharisees. So I have a little, maybe more understanding, even though we're going to talk about how arrogant they were in their. And I'll tell you one more story that Jason told. He offered an invitation, and 3 people came forward to ask for prayers. Now, that Sunday, they had set up a big table, like, come to the table. We're going to gather around the table. They had a big table set up with bread and grape juice. Well, after the service was over, they prayed for these people. This lady came straight to him, went right by those 3 people and said, "Do you realize that this is leavened bread on this table?" I mean, got to say anything to love on the people that had repented. But she wanted leavened bread on that table, unleavened bread. So Jason, he is just a great speaker. Maybe if he's here next year, and I hope he is, maybe we'll have him back. I know I would really want to have him back. Let's back up to verse 8 in John 5, and I'll read that through 18. Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "Is it the Sabbath, and is it not lawful for you to take up your bed?" But he answered them, "The man who healed me, he'd been 38 years, a cripple or lame for 38 years. The man who healed me that said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.' And they asked him, 'Who is this man who said this to you? Take up your bed and walk.' Then the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, and there was a crowd in the palace. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, 'See, you are well. Sin no more. Nothing worse may happen to you.' And the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, and I don't know, I found this picture of Jesus talking to Pharisees and high priest. Jesus answered them, 'My Father is working until now, and I am working.' And this is why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making him equal with God." Now, I think we talked about this last week. The Pharisees and the chief priests, they were the religious leaders. Everybody looked up to them. Everybody wanted them to bless them or whatever they wanted. And if Jesus had come in riding on a white horse with a sword and going to take over, defeat the Romans, they would have been right there with Jesus. But Jesus was not that kind of Messiah that they wanted. He was a lowly man from Galilee and humble, and They were not ready to give up their positions as religious leaders to this guy. No, this guy, we got to find something that he is doing wrong, even though they know he's healing people. He's doing these signs and wonders, and they are just oblivious to it. And they, will not accept what Jesus had done. Before we go on to the arrogance of these people, does anybody have anything or comment you want to make about the Pharisees, the Jews, how they felt about Jesus even though they were seeing these great miracles?
Okay.
Yes.
The thing that strikes me most about this section is when, Pharisees were the teachers of, and that was the religious leaders of the time, and they were kind of what we talked last week about how this was they were so distracted, or they were so worried about hedging, making all these extra rules that they were, and here's a case where something miraculous happens. A man that's been crippled for 38 years is walking, but he's carrying his mat. And they're so blinded by the rules that they've made for themselves, they missed God right in front of them. They missed the miracle right in front of them. That's kind of been the, just being distracted by something breaking their rule, that they're completely missing the point.
Yeah, and I got this idea from Jason Wednesday night. They thought they were doing good. They thought that was the way. They're trying to earn their way to heaven. And you can't do that. Yes, Al?
I wonder if part of this is, breaking the rules, not keeping the Sabbath, or is part of this, here's this carpenter's kid from,
Nazareth.
Nothing good ever came out of Nazareth. But here's this carpenter kid doing all these things. If it was really a holy event, we would be doing this.
Yeah.
I think he's stealing some of their thunder, and I know they're using the excuse that, he's breaking the Sabbath. But I think there's probably that and other things that, he's making us look bad.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be the teachers here. Why is he going around doing that? There must be something else going on, some magic trick. Because he didn't grow up as a rabbi or anything. He's a carpenter's son. Yet he's doing these things. I think a lot of there's probably some jealousy going on.
Well, if he'd have come into Jerusalem, I'll give you an example. Muhammad was, the last prophet, the founder of Islam. But the story about Muhammad, he said that an angel spoke to him on a mountain and told them that he was the last prophet. So he goes into Mecca and he starts saying this, that, it's not our gods that are housed in the Kaaba, but it's the one true God. And the merchants there in Mecca had a fit, because once a year, everybody in the Arab Peninsula that could came to the Kaaba, and they still do that. Every year they come to the Kaaba and they worship the gods there that were housed in that building. It's just a big square building. They built a big mosque around it, and in the courtyard, the Kaaba is still there. But the merchants were so upset that they were going to lose business if this guy gets everybody's attention and we don't have this pilgrimage to worship our idols, then so they started killing some of Muhammad's followers. So he leaves and he goes to Medina. And there's a word for that trip. I cannot think of it right now. But he goes from Mecca to Medina. Yes, thank you. And he forms an army. He is going to, and that's called, the jihad now, where you convert people by force. You do things by force to convert people to your religion. So he formed an army and went back to Mecca and took Mecca over. And he throws all the idols out of the Kaaba and makes it a holy place for, what do they call God? Allah? Yeah, Allah. And so, if Jesus had come into Jerusalem with an army and ran all the Romans out, I bet there would have been a different situation. And these high priests and Pharisees would have been more than glad to follow this guy that's coming in here and wreaking havoc over our enemies. So, let's go on and let's talk about the arrogance of the Pharisees. John 7:45 through 53. And since we're streaming this, and if you read from your seat, people that are tuning in right now or that would watch it later, they would not be able to hear this reading. So, John 7:45 through 53. The officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees, and who said to them, "Why did you not bring him?" The officers answered, "No one ever spoke like this man." So the officer has gone to get Jesus and bring him in, but he comes back empty-handed. And so the officer says, "No one ever spoke like this man." And the Pharisees answered him, "Have you also been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law is accursed." You got to follow our law. And I don't know how many additional laws they made to explain the Ten Commandments. I've heard it's over 600. But anyway, but this crowd does not know the law is accursed. Nicodemus, who had gone to him before and was one of them, said to them, "Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does?" And they replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee." You just search all the writings of Judaism. There is nothing about a prophet coming from Galilee. What they didn't realize, that Jesus was a descendant of David. It didn't say where this prophet had to be born. It just said that he would be a descendant of David. So they are so arrogant about the law. And that verse that said, "Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed him? But this crowd that does not the law is accursed," does not know the law is a curse. So if you're not following our law, you are cursed. And they were just dismissing this officer that told him, no man ever spoke to me like that. They ought to have known that they sent an armed officer and he comes back empty-handed. So, how arrogant. If you don't follow our law, you're cursed. Even though, again, they are not seeing, well, they did see the miracles, but they are just so majoring in minors. That's about the best thing I've heard in a long time. They were majoring in minors. All right, let's go to John 9, unless anybody wants to say or about this encounter with an officer that did not bring Jesus back. All right, let's go on to John 9, 30 and 34. The man answered, why this is an amazing thing. Why? This is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. Now this is following Jesus spitting in the dirt and, making mud and putting it in the eye of the blind man. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and you would teach us, and they cast him out. You are going to come in here and teach us what we need to know? No, sir. They kick him out. And Jesus had just healed him from blindness. I had never, we hear the story about the blind man and Jesus spitting in the dirt and making mud and all that. But this guy, he's a believer in Jesus. And he's telling the Pharisees why he believes in Jesus. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And the Pharisees, they're so arrogant. We're, like somebody said, we're the teachers. I think Adam said, the Pharisees, they were the teachers. You can't teach us anything. Like Bullwinkle on Rocky the Squirrel, he did this little segment on Mr. Know-It-All. If anybody, that's showing your age if you know about Mr. Bullwinkle the Moose playing the part of Mr. Know-It-All. That was a long time ago. Yes, Jake?
Judgment I come into this world so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind. And then the Pharisees who heard him said, what, are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin, but now that you claim
I don't know where he went.
But it just seems like, if you don't know any better, that's one thing. But if you know and you're still doing what you're not supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
it's even worse.
Yeah. What does it say? A person that believes and then goes back, be worse for him if it would be better for him if a millstone was hung around his neck and thrown into the sea. Yeah. Thank you, Jake, for reading ahead. But how arrogant can these people be? All right, let's go to John 19, 5 through 7. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and officers saw them, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And Pilate said, "Take him yourself and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered the headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and the authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he delivered me over to you has the greater sin." So, the Jews are ready to crucify Jesus. They know all that he did miraculously. And this is interesting. Pilate is a Roman. Yet, I guess there was a pretty big crowd out there yelling, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." And when they said, "We have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die because he has made himself a son of God." And when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. So these chief priests and Pharisees, evidently they had a big crowd with them. I don't know if Pilate had soldiers there to protect him, but why do you think Pilate was afraid of these Jews, even though he can find no fault? Al?
Well, being this is an army situation, if you're in command and you can't control what area or your own soldiers, if that gets back to, in this case, Rome, that you've lost control, you're apt to be fired, replaced, recalled, sent off to northern Alaska somewhere. It's not good. If you're in command, you're in command. And if there's riots going on, then you've lost control. And the big fear right then, if Rome gets wind of that, you're in trouble.
So he didn't want a big uprising under his command.
You've got to keep the peace, part of it. Yeah, you let them do what they want to do. The Romans didn't care anything about the Jews and their rituals and they didn't care anything about that. They just wanted to keep the peace.
And they wanted their tax money. Yeah. Money has a way of talking.
You lose control, you're in trouble. And Pilate did.
Jake.
Sorry to keep saying stuff, but it looked like he was scared of Jesus more so. That's what I was reading from.
Oh.
When they said that he's the Son of Man, he just spoke with them, was impressed with them, didn't find any fault with them. Then he goes out there, finds out that he's claimed to be the Son of God, and then it says he's even more afraid. So, I mean, are we saying he was afraid of the Romans or the situation getting out of control? Or was he afraid of...
Yeah, Pilate personally, I don't know. Somebody who's in command is supposed to be in command. If you can't do your job, you're replaced. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
In Luke 23:6, there's like a exchange between Pilate and Herod because Jesus was in Herod's jurisdiction, so that's why Pilate sent him back over. And Pilate and Herod became friends because of this exchange. It says so in the scripture. So there were other reasons, I guess, that this happened.
So this was a double whammy. He was afraid to lose control of the crowd, and Jesus is claiming to be the Son of God, and Pilate finds no fault in Jesus, finds no fault, but yet he's going to have to turn him over to the crowd. Now he has this last-ditch plan that he is going to release one of the prisoners, and of course he chooses the worst guy that they've got in their prisons there, Barabbas. And he says, well, he gives them a choice. Do you want Barabbas or do you want me to release Jesus? And they wanted Barabbas, that rascal scoundrel back on the streets.
Maybe he came to Christ.
Yeah. Could be. Yes, Gary.
What's interesting is we're talking about the arrogance of the Pharisees. They said, we know better than you to the lame man.
Yeah.
We know more than you to the blind man. And here they're saying it again, we know more than you.
Yeah, the Pilate.
Yeah, and when we get this text, we have a law. They have forgotten whose law it is. They want to interpret the law the way they want to interpret the law. They forget the whole purpose of it is to remind us of who God is. So the arrogance in this thought of I know more than you it's a scary thought.
Yeah.
It's a scary practice.
Mark.
Well, I don't think the scribes and Pharisees served the same God like, for instance, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they went into the fiery furnace.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, maybe they had lost sight of the real
their
God.
hearts are so full of deceit and their political power that they have forgotten, I think, all about that because they said, "We have no king but Caesar." Now, they didn't go into that furnace because they knew who their king was.
Yeah.
God Almighty, you know, and they went in, didn't care if they got burned up or not, but they weren't going to go along with them. But see, their minds is just full of deceit, and
Yeah.
it's a whole total different mindset. It's about them,
Yeah.
It's almost
not
like they
about God.
become God.
Huh?
It's almost like they have become God.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're not going to get to verses 19 through 29, so we'll just save that for next week. Anybody have any other comments or questions about the arrogance? And I often think, I hope if I was living at that time and I was a devout Jew, I would have seen the light. You know that old song, I saw the light, I see the light. But today, if a person comes in and claims that he is the new Messiah, would I treat him as a false prophet? Or would I kind of... But I hope if I was living back then that I would have followed Jesus. Yes.
We're certainly not perfect today. We need to do self-evaluation with how we treat the gospel.
Absolutely.
So we need to look at ourselves.
If you couldn't hear Jan over there, she says, we need to look at ourselves. We need to take a little inventory of where we are. And
How we judge others.
how we judge others, that's right. Yeah. God didn't appoint me as a judge or you as a judge. And in our next reading, I'll give you something to think about for next week. And that starts in, well, we'll finish up this, but Jesus said in verse 30, I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And down here it says, God has made me the judge. Where is that? Where's the Father raises the... Well, the Father judges no one. Now this, we'll get into this. I'm on verse 22. For the Father judges no one, but he has given all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. If I knew that, I'd forgotten that. In the last days, we're not going to be, according to Jesus, we're not going to be judged by God. We're going to be judged by Jesus. Think about that. Got a week. You are dismissed. Thank you for your attention, and